Welcome back to Bright Minded Live with Miley. I'm going to give everyone a minute to join. Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in again. I'm back today. No puppies to bite my hand the whole time. But I do have my mug. Okay, welcome back for the final episode of Highlighting Heroes Week on Bright Minded. Friday is for the future, staying engaged and positive. I love when Shirley from Beauty to the Street said, wishing is for birthday cakes and shooting stars, but taking action and creating the changes that we want to see is how we get the goals achieved. I want to start by sharing some more submissions that we've received and then share a little bit with you about what's been on my mind as we close this week. Our first fan submission comes from Jose in Chile, who highlighted his fairy godmother. I have one too, Dolly Parton. Jose says his grandmother is a seamstress and she donated 1,000 masks made by her to the workers of an agricultural company in the area where he lives. So that is amazing. And Jose, thank you so much for sending that in. Our next one is from @Cyrus Support, who says her friend is her hero, Lena. So I want to say thank you to her for cooking the food and providing the meals to homeless people and to all who can't afford to buy food right now because they lost their jobs and have no money. She gets up at 5 a.m. every morning to make food for her community for free. And she says she feels inspired to make something that could help people during this dark time and that every life matters and we should take care of one another. I love that so much, and it reminds me of the conversation, again, that I had with Shirley earlier this week about how much a difference one person can make just by caring and being kind to each other. So, Lena, you are a hero. Our last one for today is honoring the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, national organization, and the Indiana local chapter. American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in Indiana is creating and supplying flyers with information about local mental health resources to bars and restaurants that are still offering carry-out and delivery to be included with every order. This helps at-risk individuals getting connected with much-needed service and overall helps keep people bright-minded. That is so cool. So thank you so much for sharing awareness about help and resources during this time. There are so many people in need, and that's an amazing way to get those resources into their hands. It was so important for me to highlight heroes this week because this crisis was developing super quickly and the impact on what it meant, especially for vulnerable communities who are already too often overlooked. So this was important to highlight those vulnerable communities that even now in this pandemic can be overlooked and how incredible activists and leaders are already responding based on their experience and their passion. What stood out to me this week is that the issues and injustices we talked about aren't new, but the pandemic has highlighted them. What stood out to me this week is that the issues and injustices we talked about aren't new, but the pandemic has highlighted them even more, whether that's inequality when it comes to access to healthcare, financial stability, housing. And you know Happy Hippie has always been about mobilizing young people to confront injustice and do their part by taking action. And this week I'm really honored that we highlighted amazing people working on the grassroots level to confront these injustices and help us learn more about how we can support them in this time and beyond. So many of us have been talking about coming together, and I really wanted to show everyone, no matter your identity or skin color or country of origin, can make a difference. We talked about healthcare with badass pathogens expert who is also a Pakistani American mother of 3 and a Venezuelan doctor who now works in New Orleans, or Chef Andres, who came to this country when he was 21 and grew his business here and around the globe, or people who identify as Native or Indigenous, and women leaders, and so many more this week. So this is all about all of us and the power of change that we can make, and including everyone, especially the people that are underrepresented. So one idea that has come up so much this week is that we're using this time as a wake-up call to really make change, to change these injustices and press forward so we don't go back to the pre-COVID-19 world, a world with really deep inequality. I love that that's kind of been something that we've talked about all week with every guest. So even though all these guests are all so unique and so different, the kind of like common thread we've talked about is that this isn't new information. It's just being brought to the front and center, and a spotlight has been put on these issues that already existed through this pandemic. So that's why I'm really, really excited to close out this week talking to people who are pushing us to think about action and the future and how to stay informed, how to stay engaged, and to use our voice to make a difference all the time. So it is time for our first guest, Brandon Harvey, founder of Good Co. Actually found out this morning that Brandon and my friend Jamie from To Write Love on Her Arms that we talked about a couple weeks ago are really good friends. So now I've got this cool friendship circle, and it's just so interesting that in a time like this where we're socially disconnected or socially isolated, we're actually connecting in ways that we may have never done before. So I just thought that was a really cool way that Bright Minded has, again, brought people together. You all know how important it is to think and stay clear and positive, and to celebrate good news when we see it and take action on that good news. So that's why I'm really excited about Brandon Harvey, who is the founder of Good. It's a media company that focuses on helping people feel less overwhelmed and more equipped to make a meaningful difference. So I want to connect Brandon.
Hello, how's it going?
Hi, Brandon.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun, Miley. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so happy that you are here. It is very fun, and I'm just so lucky that every morning I get to start it like this, connecting with people like yourself that are just doing so much good. And something that we've been mentioning a lot is that this isn't just during this time of crisis, but this is all the time. And the news is one of the places I feel like that can be the most misleading and overwhelming, especially in the beginning of this crisis. You just didn't know where to turn to actually get reliable information. So to have something like, you know, your company and what you're doing and highlighting that and how people can be active in positive ways, it's just really, really inspiring.
Well, thank you. And you know, I've been a fan of you for a long time, and you know, I know all the words to the climb, you know, I know all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I've mostly been a big fan of the way that you use your platform to make a difference. And you were talking about Jamie, and I still remember when you and Jamie did a video in like, what, 2012, promoting To Write Love in Her Arms. And of course, I'm a huge fan of Happy Hippie. And
the way we did that was pretty funny too, because we, like, you know, again, I've tried to make good news and doing good really fun and entertaining. Because a lot of the time when you think about, you know, getting involved or doing your charity, you think about it as something as your parents would make you do, like through your church when you were a kid, you know, every Christmas, or delivering toys. You didn't have an individualized like experience with doing your work. Like I loved when I talked to Shirley, who I'm obsessed with from Beauty to the Streets. Yesterday, she's like, I couldn't deliver housing. I didn't know how to get them off the street, but I knew how to do makeup. I knew how to do hair. So taking your strengths, taking your passion, and turning that into making big change. The simplest thing that you can do if it feels overwhelming to do good is just show someone that you care, even if you start with one person a day. And I love how To Write Love in Her Arms did that. We brought awareness to suicide prevention by having me teach Joaquin Phoenix Lady Gaga dance moves.
That's right. That was it.
It was like, you know, that was the way to like kind of get people to pay attention and go, listen, this is something like really serious and really devastating, but if we can bring awareness to it in this way that actually gets people to want to be involved, to go, To Write Love on Our Arms is doing such cool things, I want to dedicate my time and my services. So it's about inspiring people and making this feel like, you know, a lot of these issues, they are really devastating, and it's like painful and heartbreaking. But if you can like bring light and try to, you know, involve yourself in whatever little way that you have control over, that's just the beginning. That's the way you start. And then you find people that are doing the same, and you start connecting and you create organizations like you have.
Yeah, I mean, you are doing my job for me right now. Like, that is my favorite idea. Just this idea that we all have the ability to make a difference, and we don't have to try to, you know, walk down somebody's lane. I know for myself that I can't, for example, build houses. Like, I would totally wreck a house if I was to build it. So I'm not going to like go on a trip to somewhere and help build houses for people who need houses. I am my background is in the world of photography and creativity. And so for me, it was always, what can I create that makes a difference using this unique skill set I have, and let the people who, are craftsmen do their thing. And right now it's, doctors and nurses and frontline healthcare workers, they get to do their things. And also we all just get to do our thing by staying home and making a difference in that way. And like, what a beautiful, easy thing for all of us to do. But it's just, we just do the next right thing that's in front of us.
Yeah, and a lot of the doctors, they really talked about that too on the show earlier this week, that I was asking, what can we do? And keeping people right now out of their hands, so they're so overwhelmed and, kind of under-resourced at the time that, like you said, staying home, washing our hands, taking care of each other, which should, again, go into our post
Yes.
COVID-19 world. It should go into our back to in our normal life, whatever normal is. And we don't want to go back to the world that we were in before, because it was totally flawed and, not equal, and all these issues that were already existing, like healthcare or housing, or just how are parents going to feed their children. And now with them not going to school, not getting those meals, which, happens in some of the, even we were talking with Second Harvest, which is in Nashville.
Yeah. Oh, they're amazing. I've worked with them too.
I love them. And so these are issues that are all year round. This isn't just during COVID-19, but families are wondering, how are they going to put food on the table every day? And there are hungry Americans every day and worldwide. So it's just really, really cool that you're doing this, again, like I said, all the time. And amidst all the chaos and tragedy of the pandemic, there are so many positive stories. So what's a piece of good news that you've heard recently that just like you loved?
So, I mean, this is the world's hardest question, because there is so much good news right now. Every single week at Good, we write down and we collect every single piece of good news that we see out in the world. We genuinely think that we probably see 90% of all the, I mean, probably not actually, but like a huge percent of the good news that happens. And it's always in a list. And it's the weeks and months where there's the most heartbreak, the most pain, where our list of good news is the longest. And so right now, because there's a lot of heartbreak, there's a lot of anxiety, I think that we're finding more good news than ever, because it comes back to this quote from Mr. Rogers that I love, where he said, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And that's like the central theme for everything we do at Good. And I think Mr. Rogers' mom is right. Like, there are always people who are helping, and there's a lot of bad. So there has to be more good. And so I actually wrote down a few things that are my favorite that I figured I could almost power through. And it does come back to this idea that you were talking about, this idea of people making a difference in their own ways. Like, I think about the fact that like I saw a nail salon in Brentwood, Tennessee, where, they can't bring people, in to do their nails right now, but they want to keep their employees paid and working. And so they're all sewing masks and making PPE. And like, what a beautiful thing for these people who are already so good with details to be able to, make a difference in that way. I love the fact that distilleries across the country are like, what do we have? Well, we have alcohol. Let's make hand sanitizer.
Amazing.
Like, that's such a brilliant move and an easy pivot. Of course, you've got artists like yourself who are, putting on shows to make a difference, but then also using their platforms to educate and advocate. We've got, oh my gosh, people adopting pets. Like, we're all at home. The fact that we all have the ability to like give love to an animal right now is beautiful. And there's hundreds of shelters across the country who, for the first time ever, have absolutely no pets to take care of, because they've sent them all out and people are caring for them. Cool. Like, that's amazing. I'm thinking about the landlords who, they're like, you know what, the way I can make a difference is I can, not make my tenants pay rent this month, and I'm going to encourage you to go out and spend it in your community. And it's like, there's just so many different ways that people are using their unique situation to make a difference. And I love that everybody's looks different. Like, that's the biggest encouragement for me. And so I don't know. That's what gets me excited. And then thinking about like, what can I do? Like, what are the things I'm uniquely positioned to do that I can step into? and encourage people to follow the same path and do the same thing themselves.
That's exactly how I've been feeling all week. Like, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's amazing to share, but now I want to do also.
Yes.
So it's really important for us when we're like hearing what everyone is doing to go, that spark that goes, oh, that's something that I could do. I live this many miles away from this food bank. I could ask my neighbors safely, like, collect what they want dropped off and like make that run. Since as little people leaving as possible is great. If you can, there's just so many ways that you can come together as a community safely, even though physically we need to stay distant. We need to stay that 6 feet apart. We need to be wearing those masks. I've had a lot of fun, like customizing some of my masks, taking old t-shirts and sweatpants that I was going to donate, turning them into the mask, and then I can donate those as well. So it's just really fun with leftover things that we have at home to be able to create these masks. I've had a really good time with that.
Yeah.
So any way that I could turn this crisis into a form of creativity, I'm definitely into.
And that's also a great point, because I think that when we allow ourselves to tap into our creative sides right now, during this time of, a lot of anxiety, we're also kind of taking care of ourselves. And it's it's the oxygen mask metaphor of, you've got to put on your own oxygen mask before you can put it on for somebody else. And if you're not taking care of yourself, it's really hard to make a difference. And that's the other thing where I think it's really important that you're focusing on the helpers, celebrating good news, so that you don't feel overwhelmed all the time, because that's the only way you're going to be equipped to make a difference for others.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about, social media, since that's how you and I are connected right now, and that's how a lot of us will connect at this time. There's a lot of misinformation, trolling. Why is it important to use social media for good, and how can we encourage more of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, I think that anytime there's bad in the world, it's super important that we engage and respond with good. Like, we have to overpower the bad with good.
Yeah.
And so if we all just like leave social media because it's filled with bad, then it's just going to be filled with bad. And so we've got to do our part to fight back against that, because I believe that's a battle we can win. But it's a hard battle. It's something that's tricky and difficult, but I believe it's possible. I think, coming back to Jamie and To Write Love in Her Arms, like, they proved that to be true back in the MySpace days and still continue to prove it to be true. Obviously, this, this show you've created is case in point. But yeah, I just important. I think that some of the best ways you can do it is by sharing the good things that you are doing, and allowing that to be an example for others. But then also sharing goodness in general is huge. Oh,
absolutely.
Am I cutting out?
I want to thank you so much for all the ways that Good is doing so much good. And thank you for keeping us bright-minded all the time, not just during this time, but always. You are the best. It paused. Hold on. And I cussed. Hold on. It's like, fuck, I gotta hear this. Okay, hold on. All right. You're blurry. You're coming back. I have no sound. Hold on. I'm reconnecting you. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. We couldn't end like that. I just wanted to say one more time, thank you so much for all the good that you're doing. Thank you for taking this opportunity to talk to me and to share what you're doing. It's just so inspiring, and I love it.
Thank you, Miley. I'm so appreciative of you and all the good you do. Like, we literally highlighted Happy Hippie in our good newspaper, like our last issue. It's so fun. Thank you so much for all this good you're doing.
Thank you so
keep
much.
Up the good. Talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Okay, so our second guest is Shutez Cat Martinez, who is an advocate, an activist, and a hip hop artist. And he is a youth leader with Earth Guardians, a youth-led movement to defend the planet. And he's active on a range of social issues, including Indigenous rights and political change. So I'm really excited for you to meet X, who is all about using his voice for change. Let's connect. Hi.
How's it going? Good to meet you.
It's going very good. I like this is, our new way of meeting in
Right.
this new normal.
Definitely. It's crazy. It's such a crazy time we're living in right now.
It is. It is. I've been even talking to like my grandma, who right now she lives kind of nearby me, but she's in senior living, and I'm unable to see her right now. And she said, "Oh, Miley, I've never seen anything like this." And I'm like,
Wow.
"You have been here for a
You've been around the block a couple of times.
seen everything." So it's pretty wild, and unable to see her and connect with her because just obviously she's one of the more vulnerable. So it's just interesting that now this is how we connect, but in ways, it's I've been trying to get my grandma to use FaceTime forever.
I feel like the whole boomer generation is about to learn a lot from technology, like within these times of quarantine.
And I've been reading a lot actually about how learning a new skill fights all these like Alzheimer's and dementia. And so I'm like, my grandma's gonna like get something, like use her brain in a whole new way. She's got Zoom and she's talking to there's 5 of us. So she's got all of us yelling at each other the same way we would be if we were in a house, but in all these different squares. And, but obviously this is a really new time. This is an idea that we're all kind of adapting to a new normal, but your work isn't new to you. This is something you've been doing way before this pandemic and something you'll continue to do after. So you've been involved for so long, way before the pandemic. How do you think that this pandemic and what you've been fighting since before are connected? So the climate crisis, environmental issues, how do you think that this pandemic is different and impacting what you've been inspired to fight for?
Definitely. It's crazy. I was really born into the movement. I think it's very much like a family legacy. Both my mother and my father have deep roots in environmental and indigenous sovereignty, justice movements. And there's a lot of parallels between the climate crisis and this pandemic. And I think one of them is that they're both man-made. I think so much of the suffering that we are seeing in the world right now is because humans, governments, people have failed to respond to this issue in the right way. And I think that speaks to the climate crisis really well too, because what we will experience over the next 5 to 10 years of climate disaster will be totally dependent on how we respond. And so we see that really clearly where in the United States, we are the hardest hit country in the world for this pandemic. And that doesn't make any sense, because we are oftentimes claiming to be the wealthiest nation in the world, the most powerful country in the world. But we can't take care of our own people. I think it has exposed so many flaws, so much social and racial injustice in this country and inequity. The same people that are being affected most by the coronavirus, by the COVID-19 pandemic, are, low income, poor, Black and brown, indigenous communities. Those are all the same people that are at the forefront, on the front lines of the climate crisis as well, that are experiencing these catastrophes from the climate crisis. And it's really interesting to see those parallels. And this is almost just like a sample of a lot of the intensity that we could experience if we don't respond to the climate crisis quick enough.
So, okay, so a word you used a lot was respond and not react. What's the difference to you, to us responding and us reacting? And because I've heard both words, it's kind of like when you're connecting with anyone, you want to respond to them, you want to listen, you want to understand. When we're reactive, sometimes we act out of impulse and don't make the right decision. So how do we respond clearly and with love and with compassion instead
100%.
of anger?
Yeah, and I think it brings it back to understanding that both of these crises are human issues. Oftentimes people think about the climate crisis as solely an isolated environmental political issue, and it removes people, and it's hard to relate to it sometimes. But what we are saying with this pandemic specifically is this is a human issue that is affecting our access to housing, to healthcare, to our ability to interact with our family, to have access to good food. I think a response comes from a place of knowing and treating the issue with, I don't know, I think just a level of being informed and operating from a place of like following not just the science and like the medical recommendations, but like how this is affecting people socially. Like when we're talking about these massive stimulus packages, we can't just think about numbers and the economics at a large scale for these big corporations. We got to think about how are people who are being unemployed right now going to be able to be affected and bounce back from this. Like I think it comes back down to that human level, and yeah, I think that's so critical.
So I know it's hard for any of us to look towards the future since we're all focused on the moment right now. But there will be a time when this pandemic is in the past, and the other issues that we're talking about now will still be a problem. So as we think about the future and life after COVID-19, what do you want to see next in terms of addressing climate crisis? And how does the general public, what do we do?
Right.
How do we get involved?
Yeah, I think it's really a dope opportunity for us to understand that in a moment of this pandemic, there are two things we need to do. One of which is fight for immediate relief and support the frontline communities that are being hit every single day. Support the workers that are on the front lines, the grocery store workers, farm workers, people in the medical space that are working every single day. And it's also a longer conversation of how do we build resilience? Because we are going to experience more and more crises down the road. And so how do we both, as you were saying, respond to the immediate needs, but also build long-term solutions? And so with the different organizations that I work with, one of them we started back in September called Now. And the project is essentially focused on, right now it's like a subscription service where you can pay a certain amount of money every month, and it goes directly towards funding massive carbon removal projects on indigenous communities to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And now at a time of Corona, we've pivoted everything so that people can not only be supporting like the reversal of the climate crisis, but we're going to only fund food forests and indigenous communities that are talking about food insecurity, food sovereignty, and offering those resources to people moving through this crisis, and recognizing that there's like a whole future of complex issues ahead of us. I think we have learned a whole lot of things, and that moments like this, moments where we're like in a total societal whirlwind, we have the opportunity to look to the future and imagine a more transformative, brilliant, thriving world. And I think you've covered this in the past, like now is a moment for transformation and for massive amounts of change, and to really look at there's so many systems, so much infrastructure that has not been serving the people. So many decision making that is happening at the highest levels of politics to local politics that aren't valuing human lives. And for people in the climate space to get involved, it's to recognize that any great change that has ever happened in history has come with a level of people power mobilizing and fighting for what we believe in, both at a political level, at an individual level. And so now is that moment to, I think, really reconsider, break it down, to think about what have we learned in this crisis and how do we take that knowledge forward to really invest in our communities, to invest in healthcare, to invest in these solutions that are bringing us closer together, that are building resilience and connectivity.
Yeah. And yeah, in times of crisis, sometimes it really does wake us up. I was actually just, as you were talking and thinking about how I've been, when we think of ways that we've been directly affected in our own community by climate change. A couple years ago, I lost my house to the fires in Malibu.
Right.
And I was very lucky to be able to rebuild. And I'm in a position where I was definitely affected and severely emotionally affected by the pictures you lose, or, songs I'd written in my journal. But I was able to move forward and to have a place to live. And not everyone is so lucky. I was thinking about even up a little north from me, Ventura County, and Malibu Foundation is doing a lot of work with them because they're just beginning to get back from these fires, and now COVID-19 is happening. And same thing in Australia. Actually, when coronavirus first really kind of hit, I was on my way to Australia to do a wildlife relief fundraiser for the bushfires in Australia. Then that was canceled because of COVID-19. I couldn't fly there. But Australia is getting hit really, really hard right now as they are just kind of coming back from these bushfires and still trying to mend from that. So just a lot happening at once. So energetically, it just feels like it's really a time that we didn't wake up to the gentle warnings. And it's time that this is really something that Shirley said from Beauty to the Streets the other day too. Is the reason why this is getting so much focus is this is happening to all of us. That is true. But again, I'm affected in a very different way than some of the most vulnerable populations,
100%.
as I am always, and I'm not blind, or am not aware of that. I'm very aware of that, which is why I created this platform to try to highlight those issues, because the way I'm affected by COVID-19 is not the regular experience. That's not what most people worldwide, not just in this country, are experiencing. So there's an awareness of that. And I wanted to create this show also because a lot of the news that I'll get is only news about my own country or even my own city. A lot of my news is curated for Los Angeles. Going to some of the more rural parts of the country, even where my parents are from in Kentucky, talking to people in Nashville, the food banks there, but then also just talking about this crisis as worldwide. And so many of my fans are from all around the world. I have Spanish fans commenting on here now, Italian fans that were hit super hard, some of my Brazilian fans. So just using this platform to connect all of us, even though we're all so different. Again, this is kind of bringing us together in the way that we're all being affected, even though the way that we are affected is really unique to one another.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I heard you say earlier today was that we have to reject this idea that we need to like go back to normal, return to the normal world before coronavirus, because like in that world there was still so many people suffering from everything from a lack of access to healthcare to crippling student debt to our communities being ravaged by the climate crisis with no proper response or investment in future resilience. And I think now is this opportunity to look at how do we transition into a world where we are responding to the greatest, most existential threats that are going to continue to impact our society. And there's like a, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, well, yes, it just reminded me because yesterday I talked to Heather from my friend's place, which is a homeless youth shelter that Happy Hippie and I have been a part of for years. And she said that she really had to educate the youth that were coming in to get their, usual socks and food, because they didn't really actually know what was going on, because life wasn't that different to them during COVID-19 to it was before. They can never have access to the water and food that they need. They never have the option of housing and being taken care of, by our city. So really life didn't change that much for a lot of the homeless youth in LA. And so just realizing that a lot of the populations that we are talking about, this is a pre-COVID-19 issue that is being highlighted by the pandemic. Because now we're really seeing our cracks and our flaws
in the infrastructure.
This was already an issue. It just wasn't getting the attention that we're getting it now.
Right. And one thing I want to say, like on an environmental tip, I've seen like across social media different people talking about how, like because everyone's quarantined, we have cleaner air, we have cleaner water in some places. There's lower rates of pollution. People can see the Himalayas from northern India. And while some of these stories are true, if we think about it, like, yes, we want cleaner air. Yes, we want cleaner water. Yes, we want a stable climate. Yes, we want to transition away from fossil fuels and stop burning so much oil. But that shouldn't come at the cost of millions of people losing their jobs, thousands of people losing their lives, economic depression, and so much fear and uncertainty. And I think in indigenous communities and a lot of the way that I was raised is that there is no separation between ourselves and the natural world, and nature, our water, our air. And so when we can, it's almost like impossible for me to think of these small wins, like so-called wins in the environmental space, when there's so much suffering happening, like not, and celebrating that just feels problematic in a lot of ways. And I think we can really make this an opportunity for us to think about, okay, we want and we need cleaner air. Like the climate crisis is demanding transformative change at every level of society. And we are seeing that the infrastructure that exists is not protecting our people, and it is not valuing human lives at the most high. And so when we move forward, when we look at the 2020 elections in November, when we look at the elections down the ballot of other representatives and other local politicians who are running on platforms, we need to be looking into the future of who is going to build a platform and a space for us to transition into a beautiful, thriving, healthy, positive, powerful place where we are able to be more unified, where we can see that we are fighting for one another. And I was a surrogate on the Bernie Sanders campaign and worked really hard in different spaces with that. And I saw that you had Elizabeth Warren on the other day, and like these different political leaders who are fighting for really important issues. And I think now what we have to recognize is that as people, as young people, we have so much power. We have so much power to push the envelope on any issue we care about, whether it's gender equality, the climate crisis, social and economic justice. First of all, they're all woven together. And when we look at these elections moving forward, it's about the pressure that we apply in all these different spaces to make sure that those in power are representing the voices of our communities, of our people.
That was actually my next question. Yeah, so something I was talking with Elizabeth Warren about yesterday was about her plans to make sure that we can all vote safely in
Mm.
November because staying healthy and you're right is those shouldn't come at cost of one
Yeah.
another. So
Yes.
I was talking about our plans yesterday and how we protect our democracy and make sure that we don't have to choose our right to vote and our health. So can
Mm.
you talk about what the elections mean to you and what would you say to people who aren't politically engaged right now? Why is it so important?
Honestly, I spent a lot of my life being really involved in social movements, but not so engaged politically. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where I realized like these spaces can be really transformative when people apply pressure. And one of the movements that I was really involved with is a grassroots movement to stop this pipeline from being built called the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah.
That happened, a handful of years ago. And Obama eventually vetoed and blocked the access for this pipeline to be built from Canada across the US that would have been detrimental to the climate. And it wasn't just because Obama was this great climate hero, it was because people for years put massive amounts of pressure. Indigenous communities built coalitions with farmers, with rural farmers across the United States, and really pushed really hard to get this transformative change to happen. And when we look at the political climate, young people have completely changed it, have made sure that politicians across the ballot have acknowledged the climate crisis as a top issue for our generation. We have completely pushed the entire Democratic Party closer to a Green New Deal platform, which is the comprehensive and really the only comprehensive vision for responding to this crisis through a lens of justice and equity. And I think it's really powerful for me to look at different organizations like the Sunrise Movement that is doing a lot of political organizing around the climate and seeing that these issues are not just distant issues in the future to be debated by politicians, but if we want to make sure that our voices are included, we have to apply that to the process immediately. The margins of victory that happened for Bernie's campaign in various states happened because young people turned out to vote. And when we think about, what this November election particularly means, it's like there's a lot on the line. Not just because of this virus, but because, as you're saying, so many of these other systemic issues that have been here for generations that have been continued to be impacted from colonialism and the enslavement of African peoples and so much intense violence, like at the foundation of this country. And for us to talk about building a brighter future, envisioning what we want the world to look like, getting politically engaged is one step in that process, and voting is like an entry level process and an opportunity for all of us to take. And we, again, have a lot of different champions that are fighting for a Green New Deal down the ballot that aren't just running for the presidential office, but for various different levels of power, and recognizing that local politics is also really important, because I think one thing we've seen with this pandemic too is there's actually a lot more local leadership that is happening in these times, even in federal leadership. Lots of states and local governments are doing their part much more than the federal government.
And that's how you make change. We talked about that on the show yesterday. Is local and state and all, when we all work together, and federal, everyone working together, that's how you actually make change. And a lot of these local leaders are doing more than our politicians. And I like when you said Obama, it was really about the people, because a lot of these people watching right now, we forget how much of a difference that we can make. And that really does start with voting in November. That's, like we were talking with the doctors, the least you can do right now is stay home and stay safe. But in November, it's really important to vote safely. Elizabeth was talking about the mail-in ballots, because
100%.
that's one way that you can make a difference. And so many times we go, well, I'm just one person, I can't make a difference. But these little simple things that you can do just by having your voice heard are really, really important. So it's really important to get out of the mindset, well, I'm only just one.
Right.
One adds up very, very quickly. And I like when you were talking about just applying that pressure, the power of people actually coming together and making their voices heard. But you can be heard more if you find like-minded people, that want the same thing that you want.
Definitely.
So I want to talk about, you and I, again, finding talking about like-minded people. You and I are both creative and artists, and I think that's why this conversation, I really, really enjoyed it, and I felt like I really connected to you just because I know that you use your art to communicate your political messages also, or your what you want to see happen or change. You use your music, you know, to echo that. Same thing, like, you know, when I write songs like The Climb, about not giving up, or writing songs about mother's daughter, which is about, like, you know, the generations of me, my grandma before that, and not having the power. You know, my grandma came at a time where her voice was really never heard, and now I'm known as one of the loudest voices in the country. So watching that, like, you know, that kind of generational evolution, and still being, you know, just using our music to communicate what we feel. So how do you feel like your art reflects, like, your values?
Yeah, I think we are, our society tells us that creating change or being an activist is like a linear path. It looks a specific way, your voice sounds a specific way, the way you portray yourself in public has to be a specific way. I think our generation is challenging all of that. I think young creatives out there are showing the world, like, we need all hands on deck to shape the future. We need artists, entrepreneurs, storytellers, creatives, poets, craftsmen, like people that are at every level of our society to play their part, to share their art, to use their voice. And for me, you know, who grew up like just super in love with hip hop culture as a powerful tool to wake people up, to authentically connect and bring people together in a different way. Because I've been public speaking in and out of the UN, giving TED Talks since I was like 6 years old.
Yeah.
And when I started going on tour and performing and playing for hundreds of people, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, the energy is different because it's like a space where we can really come together. And the music and the artwork, that flips the way that we are able to touch people's hearts. And that, I think, is where a lot of transformation begins in inspiring people, because that's, I feel like, where I can be the most authentic. And it's crazy, like it just happened to line up, like literally this morning we just dropped a music video for a song off this album that we just came out with. And it's all about creating that space artistically to share light with the world, to inspire people. And I'm just have been, you know, inspired by artists like yourself too, who have opened up and used those platforms. And if you look through history from, you know, Bob Marley, and Rage Against the Machine and Calle 13, Residente, like these different artists have opened up a space in culture for the masses to be able to tap into a message that is profoundly about much more than just entertainment. That's what I aim to do with my art every single time we create. With the album we just put out, with the video we just dropped, that's the whole vision. And you get it, you know, you understand. And I think for all of y'all out there who are watching, who are tapping in, whether it's creatively, whether it's whatever passion it is that you have, like, you have a part to play within this movement. We have a part to play in deconstructing the idea of what creating change means, because that belongs to all of us. Our future and crafting it belongs to each and every one of us. And that's a powerful responsibility, a powerful moment, you know, to really be taking a second and taking a break from everything and like reevaluating that. And I'm seeing a lot of creation, a lot of beautiful creation in this time too. And I'm definitely really inspired by that.
Absolutely. And if you don't write music or write poetry, you know, in ways of painting, or even I was talking to a photographer about taking a selfie a day, so you like see the experience from all these different people, from all these different places around the world. One of my favorite artists, there's like some self-portrait artists, and I was actually talking to an LGBTQ historian that was saying journaling every day, your experience, that's how history is really written, from every individual, from the general public's point of view. So journaling is a way to be creative, even if you're not songwriting or writing poetry. Journaling what you're feeling, how you're being affected by this pandemic as an individual, and that like makes history. Your personal experience is what creates history, and to share that. So I definitely encourage, you know, painting, creating, writing, but also just something as simple as just journaling your experience through this.
Right.
I want to thank you so much. I could not think of a better way to like close this week. This has been such an awesome conversation, and I think it really reminded all of us that this is something that we should have been fighting for, or maybe you were pre-COVID-19, but it's definitely something that has to go past this pandemic and become a part of our everyday life.
100%. Yeah, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you opening up the platform. And
I'm glad you have new music. I'm going to listen right now.
yeah. I'll send you the link.
All right. See you. Thank you.
Peace.
All right. I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of Bright Minded. I want to thank you guys for being a part of Bright Minded Highlighting Heroes this week. This week has meant so much to me, and I've learned so much from the incredible people, and I'm just getting inspired to talk about all these issues, and they're affecting so many people around us. And now I'm just so much even more passionate, and we can all make a change going forward with issues like healthcare and economic security and housing and access to food and clean water and taking on the climate crisis. And even though Bright Minded is coming to an end, this is really just the beginning for myself and for all of us. There's so much hard work that needs to be done. And together we're unstoppable, but first we have to get started. So don't stop highlighting your heroes and don't stop being a boss. Okay. So I've learned so much from all the incredible guests, and I'm so inspired about all these issues that are affecting everyone around us. And now I'm just even more passionate, and we can really make change moving forward. Even though Bright Minded is coming to an end, this is really just the beginning. There's so much hard work that needs to be done, and together we're unstoppable. But first we have to get started. So don't stop highlighting your heroes, and don't stop being the hero yourself. We all need to do our part to get through this together and to stay involved in encouraging each other and celebrating the work that so many people are doing in our community. So keep hashtagging highlighting heroes. I'll keep posting. And thank you again for another beautiful week on Bright Minded. I've enjoyed learning so much and connecting with all of my guests and also all of you watching. So I love you. Stay lit, everybody.